everybody, and welcome to the weekend review edition of the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell. Joining me on the other end of the line is a man with the English accent, which means he can talk soccer. It's Ryan Bailey. Hello, Ryan.
Well, hello, Taylor. What a privilege to be here. What?
First of all, I appreciate you playing that one up. That is actually how Ryan sounds normally. He tones it down for the show, but he takes off the monocle, I think, before we start recording. But generally speaking, that's how he sounds.
Yes, I do my terribly uncouth accent for the podcast normally, but we shall switch over shortly. Here.
Do you actually get that sometimes? Like, do people just assume you're all about soccer? Does it make you sad when people come up to you, hear the accent, and ask, like, which team do you support?
It's a safe assumption, I suppose, but I don't get offended by that. But I get offended by most people thinking I'm Australian. I think 90% of people think I'm from Australia when they meet me in this country. It's strange. I think it's because they expect me to speak like the Queen, and I don't.
All right, and then one more question. Is this about how the usual... We're going to, do a role play here. Is this about how the conversation usually goes? Like, oh, you're English. Which team do you support?
Oh, yeah, and then I say, Wimbledon.
And they say... oh, yeah.
No, they go, which Premier League team do you support? And I say, I support Wimbledon. We were in the Premier League. We're not anymore. And then they say, no, you don't understand me. Which Premier League team is your team? And it goes around like that for maybe 6 or 7 minutes before I walk away.
And then you just slowly fade into the bushes, a la Homer Simpson.
Exactly.
I like that approach.
Indubitably.
Well, we will start with the English Premier League, as we are wont to do. We're going to start with Chelsea's 1-0 loss at home to Bournemouth. Ryan, where are your thumbs for this game?
I've got a few thumbs. Let me start up with a nice thumbs up for Chelsea.
All right.
For keeping a festive tradition maintained. You know, there's a lot of traditions around this time, and one of Chelsea's is their annual loss to Bournemouth. So well done for that, because the past 2 Januaries, they have done the same thing, and they've done it here again, a little prematurely, just before Christmas for us here. But, yeah, I mean, that's about the only thumbs up I'm going to give Chelsea, because otherwise, a little bit of a mess in this game, were they not?
They absolutely were, and I think it was exemplified by, as people have already pointed out, the center backs looking long every single time or looking lateral. It was a lot of strange passing combinations and long direct, route one direct sort of balls over the top. Not a lot of quick passing, not a lot of kind of what we have seen Frank Lampard's teams do, or at least this Chelsea team do, somewhat well this season. In this case, very much less so, which leads to kind of a faltering attack, which leads to Chelsea losing.
It does indeed, and their 4th loss in 5 Premier League games, a pattern is emerging here, Taylor. And it was just a bit toothless in many ways, wasn't it? There was sort of no ideas up top. Tammy Abraham wasn't getting much service. It seemed that the midfield wasn't up to much. Willian and Christian Pulisic couldn't quite get through like they usually do as well. I mean, Chelsea had 67% possession in this game. They had 13 attempts on goal. They had 5 on target, and they didn't get one past Bournemouth. Bournemouth, who are... we can label them as a troubled team this season, and they managed to get yet another result at Stamford Bridge. It's a very odd situation here, and I'm starting to wonder if this team isn't built for the top 4 for the long term, Taylor. It seems like maybe they had a big old new manager bounce, and maybe they need a little bit more backbone to go over the line here.
So would the idea then be that it's basically you've got a bunch of kids who haven't been given the opportunities, they've been loaned out, you've got a newcomer in the form of Christian Pulisic coming in, that maybe they all finally have a chance, they're all kind of raised their game, they perform collectively very, very well, but at a certain point, fixtures catch up with you, the wear of the season catches up with you, the lack of reinvestment or investment at all in the summer catches up with you, and now maybe there's been a downturn in form?
Yeah, I think that, and also maybe a bit of a contribution from Frank Lampard here, or lack thereof. I don't think he, I don't think they tried much, didn't try to change much in this game, did they? It didn't seem like Lampard had many ideas to get things going, and also, was it just me, or did things seem a little bit more negative? A few more sideways passes, Emerson didn't, it seemed like a lot of passes back to Zuma. It seemed like nothing going forward, whereas they've been a bit more positive in previous games. Is that just me, or was that...
No, it's definitely not you. This felt like, I think every now and then when you have a new sort of style, a new sort of system being implemented, even when it's December and the manager in question has been in charge since August, when you start to have those games, or that one game when maybe those runs into space or people dropping in, those stop happening, and you could see the frustration, to your point, that you could see people kind of looking for options and they just weren't there, and you'd get a lot of hands up while the player had the ball in that sort of okay, is anybody going to run? And so I think as soon as that didn't happen once or twice, they reverted to the kind of lateral, sideways passing, slowing it down. And I think that did frustrate Frank Lampard. He talked about that after the game. But I think it's also sort of what has been like beaten into them over the last 6 managers at Chelsea. I believe that's how many they've had in 3 seasons. It takes a toll, and I think you have to kind of stick with it and find your way through that. I do think it being almost January helps Chelsea tremendously because their transfer ban has been reduced, so they will be able to sign players this January. Is that something you think they should do, Ryan, or should they stick with the squad as they have it now, see what these players are capable of doing for the second half of the season, and then invest once you know your vulnerabilities for sure? Or do you think with top 4 still being a possibility, you invest in January to try to make something happen now?
I think the latter, and the latter would be a very Chelsea move as well, wouldn't it? And when I think on the running order here, you put where should they invest? And my immediate thought was up top, because I think Tammy Abraham looks like he needs a bit of a rest. Looks like he could certainly use some support, maybe some an alternate up there. But then he only had 29 touches in this game, Taylor, and that speaks to me about the service he's getting. So maybe I'm a little bit worried about the midfield as well. But then where do you change that midfield? Because there's a lot of good bodies in there as well. I can't quite figure it out. So to answer your question, I have no idea. But I thought it was to get a striker maybe the priority.
I think you've gotten there in that you never want to blame the striker entirely when the goals stop coming or when the goals aren't as regular, because very often it's not that the striker just suddenly isn't good anymore. It's a lack of service, or the attack has changed, or any number of factors. But I do think you've got a point there with fatigue and how much Tammy Abraham has been used, because when Lampard plays, say, Olivier Giroud, it just doesn't work. It clearly isn't the style of striker he wants. Batshuayi hasn't really hit the ground running for Lampard either. So I do think you're right that maybe looking for a depth option or a player that you could bring in for relatively cheap and then have them sort of augment Abraham or help Abraham along and then still expel him some minutes. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I do also think that you're right, that you've got to look at the midfield. Kovacic was the player you signed because that was the only player you could sign in the summer, because he had previously been on loan with an option to buy. But does that really kind of strengthen the squad enough? The center backs, as we've already talked about, weren't particularly strong on the weekend. So do you look for a ball-playing center back? I don't think Chelsea fans would be too sad to see another striking option brought in, and maybe to see another center back brought in who can play the ball out of the back. That would be my answer.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably the two positions, and those centre backs. They might be thinking ahead to that Bayern Munich game in the Champions League draw, which we'll probably talk about later, and thinking about those centre backs up against your Lewandowskis and your Gnabry's and your Goretzkas, and thinking, ooh, that's a tricky matchup, isn't it?
Yeah, let's get David Luiz back in there. Let's just get him back in Chelsea. Let's just keep bringing him back in every couple seasons. We'll get him back at Chelsea and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's definitely need to bring back Didier Drogba and put him in central defence.
That would be fine with me.
It's the solution for that Champions League game anyway. But can I give a thumbs up to VAR in this game, Taylor? Because I've been a very vocal critic of the new technology on this podcast. I make no secret about that. But I thought this is where it's meant to be used, because in years gone by, that goal would have been absolutely ruled out. They would have said it never crossed the line. They would have said it, they would have said that was, offside and wouldn't have been given. And this is why we have it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because you're absolutely right that the flag goes up. I'm actually even surprised the flag went up as quickly as it did, because it was marginal. From my understanding, they're supposed to let those go. They did not, but luckily the ball, I think, goes in before the whistle is blown by the center official so that it can be reviewed. And when it's reviewed, it is absolutely a goal, both because it crosses the line and because Gosling was onside. So yeah, I think even though maybe there was a tiny bit of human error there briefly, I think this is exactly what it's meant to be used for, because it's absolutely correct that Gosling times his run really, really well. He spots that the Chelsea backline haven't really stepped out en masse, so it's more of a ragged offside line than it is an actual line, and I think correctly drops in, finds space, scores a lovely goal. VAR says it's good, so well done VAR. My question for you then, Ryan, is does he mean to do that? Because I feel like he definitely means to score this goal, but it's so strange looking the way he sort of lofts it while not facing goal that it does seem a little bit lucky, but I'm assuming he knew what he was doing.
He meant to put the ball in the direction of the goal.
All right.
Is that what helps? I mean, I think we should give full credit to Bournemouth here, and full credit to Gosling as well, because he was probably their best player. I mean, Lerma and Billing in the midfield were very good as well, but he's grown so much. Gosling has grown so much as a player. If he grows any more, he's going to become a goose. You like that? Like that one? Thank you very much.
I can't believe how much I like that one. Maybe it's just that I'm so used to Daryl's like delivery of the pun that when you just rush right through it, it hits like all at once and maybe lands that much more. But well done, Ryan Bailey. I enjoy
slower delivery. Note taken. Thank you.
Any other things you would like to talk about when it comes to Chelsea v Bournemouth, aside from well done Bournemouth and commiserations to Chelsea?
I think we've given that one justice. Shall we move on?
We shall. Let's move on to Arsenal, Man City. Arsenal hosting Man City. City go up 3-0. Could have been a lot worse, but it finishes that way as well. And I'm going to say this was, as we've talked about previously, I think a game of one team were very bad and got it very wrong, and one team were their usual selves, which maybe they haven't met as much this season. But Man City come out, as we've seen Man City come out, very aggressive, very like probing passes, lots of movement off the ball, and lots of great finishing. Arsenal not really pressing, not really sitting deep, not really trying to play out of the back, not really trying to go long. Not entirely certain what Arsenal were hoping for in this game. But with that said, it didn't really matter because when you have a player like Kevin De Bruyne in the form he's in, it doesn't really matter. And I will say thumbs up to him for that on-field performance. I'm going to say thumbs down to his mustache-beard combo that he's got going on. It's not a great look. We're past November, so he can shave if he wants to. But aside from his horrific facial hair, a tremendous performance from Kevin De Bruyne.
Absolutely. I hadn't actually noticed the facial hair thing until you mentioned it, and I had a look on Getty Images, and I've done some close-ups, and you are right, it's bad. It's like I think it's like Chili's manager facial hair. I think it's like the guy who sells the cell phone covers in the stall in the middle of the mall facial hair. That's what he's got going on there, isn't it?
It's an interesting look because of you almost made me cackle there. Because I think the pink skin combined with the ginger hair, it's just a strange look to begin with, and it looks like a small child putting on like fake beard to try to buy beer or something like that. It doesn't look right. It looks sort of like, why is that tiny child taking hormones to grow facial hair? Can't he just wait until he grows it naturally? But I guess Kevin De Bruyne has gone the route he's gone, and when you're as good as he is, maybe you're allowed to do whatever you want. Maybe that's what this is. It's just he's gotten so good that he's just sort of like trying to do different things that would otherwise be laughable.
Yeah, I think he can get away with the kind of performance he put in this game. Near perfect, wasn't it? My fantasy team thanks him very much. But I think I've been critical of Pep doing the 4-2-3-1 because I think 4-3-3 is naturally where it should be, and Fernandinho should be in the defensive midfield, blah, 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 the same thing I say every week. But it worked here, didn't it? I think because De Bruyne was put in that number 10 role, he was freer to get forward and support Jesus, and Rodrigo and Gundogan were sort of gave him that cover in that double pivot, which I thought hasn't worked in the past but did work here. And perhaps the reason it didn't work is because Arsenal were absolutely useless in this game. Because they offered very little in this one, didn't they? The Chinese government, I don't know if you read, they blocked this game from their state TV channel because of comments made by Mesut Ozil. And I think the Chinese government did Arsenal a favour there, to be honest. This was pretty sad to see for everyone around the world, I think. And City, for once, didn't have to worry about any potential defensive shortcomings they had because it was just men against boys, wasn't it?
It absolutely was, and it was a game that I really wanted Arsenal to do better, not because I dislike Man City or particularly enjoy Arsenal, but it's actually for what you just mentioned there. I thought it was a credit to Mesut Ozil, who at times has spoken out against or spoken out in favor of politicians who I'm not a big fan of, looking in the direction of Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey. But on this occasion, mentioning the treatment of the Uyghurs and how oppressed they have been and everything that is horrifically going on there in China, I think is to his credit to kind of use his platform to kind of spread awareness of a situation, but simultaneously I think Arsenal then being like, we don't agree with them at all, please don't ban us, is definitely a sign of where the commercialism of soccer has gone, that they definitely were not willing to kind of go with them. And so I had hoped then that it was going to be this, like Mesut Ozil takes the game by the scruff of the neck, which is not really his style, so already I think I'm kind of on a fool's journey here. But like I wanted it to be a game where he kind of elevates his performance, and then not only is he speaking, truth to power, but also then performing well on the field, and instead he slowly walks off and then kicks a water bottle a la Arsene Wenger, and it really wasn't the way I kind of hoped that game was going to play out, at least for him.
Yeah, if you give him credit for his political stance, you certainly detract from that from his position on the field, because he offered nothing in this game. There's a nice line in the Guardian's match report that said the cleanest connection he made on anything was when he booted away his gloves upon his substitution.
Oh, his gloves, excuse me, not a water bottle. Not the water bottle. He didn't go full Wenger. He just went a little Wenger with the...
I mean, yeah, for a guy who does keep-ups with his chewing gum, you think gloves is a bit more of an attainable target for him.
Yes, you would.
Yeah.
But it was also just a strange game. I kind of just have like thumbs down to Arsenal in general, and then them as an organization as well, because there were moments when I wanted to kind of criticize the fans for leaving when they did. To their credit, several fans, I shouldn't say many, but a lot of fans stuck around until really it seemed like this one was done and dusted.
You mean 15 minutes?
I mean, you had a few leave, and that's when I was sort of like, come on, like, you don't know how this is going to go. Like, you've paid good money. Why not stick around? And then I think around halftime, I was like, all right, maybe I get it. I understand it a little bit more. That's fair. But it was that. It was the Kolasinac substitution that seems to have thrown everything out of order, because Kolasinac is down injured. He's getting treatment. Then he pops up, walks off the field. Saka is supposed to sub on, but I think Kolasinac, the idea was we'll kind of suck up some time, wait for Saka to get ready, and then once he's stripped down from his 14,000 layers of clothing he has on, we can sub them in right away. Whereas Kolasinac, I think, gets up, walks off, so they have to rush the substitution. Saka's not ready, and I think that's where the third goal happens, is when Arsenal are down to 10 men. So you've got confusion there. You've got confusion with Ozil. You've got just sort of confusion all over the place, and an inability to, as I said in the introduction, like sort of do any one game plan in any convincing way so that you see what they're trying to do. You see where the progress is coming from. Instead, this one finishes 3-0, and it could have been a lot worse, and you almost come away with the idea that, like, Arsenal were kind of fortunate not to lose that one 5 or 6-0.
Yeah, Man City kind of Germany versus Brazil'd it in the second half, didn't they? They certainly they were only in third gear. I think they dropped it to second for the second half. But I mean, I will back up and fortify your point of the thumbs down to Arsenal as an organisation, but also on the field. You look at those 3 goals, like. For the first one, when De Bruyne puts it, a very nice sort of it's a volley, isn't it, into the top of the net. There's no one within 6 yards of him when he's there, when the ball's cut back to him by Gabriel Jesus. The second goal, I mean, it's a nice, De Bruyne's got 3 men round him. He beats 3 men. I mean, you can say that's a quality of De Bruyne or a shortfall of those 3 men who were beaten by him, and he picks out Sterling for that finish. Kolasinac is in complete no man's land when that goal goes in. I don't know what he's doing there. And the third goal, we got Guendouzi doesn't lay a glove on De Bruyne. De Bruyne could do whatever he wanted in this game. He absolutely dominated midfield. I don't know what Guendouzi or Torreira were doing in this match, because he was just allowed to do what he wants. So I think very, very poor on the field, but also off the field. Yeah. I think it's important to make the point that, let's compare it to Tottenham. They sacked Mauricio Pochettino. The next day, Jose Mourinho arrives to great fanfare. Arsenal, they sacked their manager. No plan. Not even any support for Fredrik Ljungberg, who's got Per Mertesacker, who's the academy manager at the moment, getting him on double duty, and basically getting them to work on a game-by-game basis. They're not going to bring in anyone new until... It's kind of... They're in this weird holding pattern with Ljungberg, who... You've got to feel sorry for him, because he's not getting much support here, and he's... it doesn't look like there's much long-term future for him. And it's damning of Arsenal's organisation, the way they've set this up.
It absolutely is, because I saw that quote from him after this game in The Guardian. I saw him talking about, like, I need them to make a decision. They've got, if it's not me, that's fine, but there needs to be a decision made. And I was sort of like, really, dude? Like, I think you've won 1 in 5. Like, you really want to try to press this issue. You read the article, you kind of think back on things. And yeah, to your point, Per Mertesacker is his, only coach, because all of the other coaches left with Unai Emery. Yeah. And Per Mertesacker doing double duty. He is not a first-team coach. He's supposed to be the academy director, but he's trying to do both. And I think to Lundberg's point, it sort of is like, we can't call people up from the youth teams because their coaches don't want to risk them coming up and not being played and it shattering their confidence, but I don't have the backing of the club to be able to make that decision. So I kind of can't call up players. I can't appoint coaches. No one knows entirely the permanence or lack of permanence of the situation. And I think, to your point about Tottenham, like, Arsenal, I think they went this route of like, no, we don't want to rush to a decision. We want to be smart. Too often teams make these sort of reflex decisions, and we don't want to do that. And I get that idea, and that's a good way to be, is to slow it down and make a rational choice. But then when there's no follow-through and there's no sort of progress on top of that, it suddenly goes from like, okay, they're taking their time to make a choice, and instead is they don't really know what to do, and so they're just sort of sitting there hoping something happens. And that's a big, big difference between they know what they're trying to do, they know who they want to interview. I think Football Weekly made this point, and I appreciated it, that like you look at the people they're supposedly linked with, and it's Ralph Rangnick, it's Mikel Arteta, I think Ancelotti has supposedly been in there but has since been ruled out. Allegri was in there, and it's just like none of those managers have anything in common. And if you don't have anything in common with the person who's supposed to be taking over, to me that says they don't really know who they're looking for. They just know they need a manager, and it's probably not going to be Lundberg, but they don't feel confident saying that yet. So instead, the kind of show rolls on, and it's not a particularly good show anymore, especially for Arsenal fans.
Now, if I'd have taken that last minute of your speaking out of context, you could have been talking about Man United there.
Well, there's that too.
To be fair.
Yeah, but we don't really need to talk about them. We talk about them plenty. But it's a credit to Man City, who, after not having the best run of form, come out, smash Arsenal, and then Pep Guardiola does Pep Guardiola things after the match, saying, I think they're like, oh, you righted the ship, that was a much better performance. And he was sort of like, no, like, we played better against Manchester United. And I feel like he was trying to say, like, he was trying to do the thing where he doesn't let his players get too arrogant, but whatever. But instead, it definitely came across as like, no, Arsenal aren't that good. Like, it definitely was a more of a bummer, I think, for Arsenal fans to hear than the game itself may have been.
Yeah, compounding their misery there. So to conclude, Man City good, Arsenal bad. Tune in next week to see if that's still the case. It might not be.
It probably will be. But until next week, we should talk about today's sponsor. It's SeatGeek. SeatGeek make buying and selling tickets to concerts, events, all different types of live shows that much easier. A quick look at the App Store shows you they have 50,000 five-star reviews, so you know they've got a lot of satisfied customers who have enjoyed using their services to buy and sell tickets to all of the many live events they could go see.
SeatGeek pulls in millions of tickets from all over the web. Millions, I tell you. And they rate them each on a deal scale of 1 to 10, and also like a traffic light system. Green is a good deal. Red, bad deal. Don't touch those ones. That's what I really like about SeatGeek. It's really easy to use, and you've got that interactive seat map that lets you pick your seat out and find the best value on, not necessarily the best or most expensive, the most expensive seat, but the best value, which is really good. Every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for your tickets with confidence. And if there's one thing I want to do with my tickets, Taylor, it's shop for them with confidence.
I mean, I think that is a fair thing to want to do, my friend. I think what I can be confident in is looking at using SeatGeek as a way to buy tickets to basically seasons that are over for certain teams that would have once been very, very expensive tickets are now not. So, for example, the Washington professional football team hosting the New York Giants this coming weekend, I believe you can find tickets for $9. So if you use the promo code I'm going to give you later on, I believe you could make $1 and still go see the Washington professional football team. But tickets are up to $16. I think you can find those incredibly cheaply. Similar for the Washington Wizards. I think most of their home games, for example, Chicago Bulls coming to Washington on December 18th, that would be $13. You've got a few different ones like that, exemplified by when the Wizards go to the Knicks when they're playing in New York. Those are $105 tickets. When the Knicks come to D.C., they're $30 tickets. So maybe a sign of the way I think things have gone in Washington since the Nats win.
Yeah, I think if you look at those Washington NFL tickets, the $9 ones, they're actually given a red. They're bad value. They should be paying you $9, right?
I see what you did, and I like it. I also like that SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code, download the SeatGeek app today, and use promo code TSS for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code TSS for $10 off your first purchase. Thank you very much to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode. A link to that offer will be in the show notes. But for now, Ryan Bailey, we've got El Clasico midweek this week. Let's talk a little bit about how things are in La Liga, where Barcelona remain top of the table, though I did not think that was going to be the case after they drew 2-2 with Real Sociedad on Saturday, but then Madrid drawing 1-1 in their game on Sunday with, I believe, Valencia. That means the table stays as it was. Let's focus on Sociedad Barcelona. Where have you got thumbs in this game?
I got thumbs for Sociedad, of course. They were pretty impressive this one, weren't they? They were pressing really well. They were very technical. The passing was lovely. I love how Real Sociedad are like the island of misfit toys. They got Nacho Monreal, they got Martin Odegaard, they got Adnan Januzaj. It's like, I remember him from previous instances. This is fun, isn't it? And they all came together very well. And I have to say, I know I mentioned the betting column that I do quite frequently on this podcast, but I absolutely called a 2-2 draw in this game.
Now, why did you call that? How did you know? What did you think was going to take place?
I just looked in the crystal ball, and that's what it told me.
Of course.
I can't control it. Well, no, the reason was because Real Sociedad are basically Barcelona's bogey team. They don't like coming to the Real Arena. The last time they were beaten there, actually, to be fair, it was 2016, but that was the 5th consecutive time they'd lost there. Yes, Barcelona lost to David Moyes' Real Sociedad. Do you remember that one? That was sort of the peak David Moyes of his time in Spain. And, Sociedad, they're a good team this season. They're in 4th. They'd already beaten Atletico Madrid 2-0 at home. They'd only failed to score in one of their last 13 league games. So I thought this is where Barcelona stumbled. This is where the cracks in the Valverde team start to appear once again. And hey-ho, what do you know? It happened. Aren't I amazing, baby?
I enjoyed this game because it was a little bit of like lunacy and in a confusing way and in a good way at the same time, because you had moments for Barcelona when they had one where I think they start with a goal kick, they play it out of the back, they come under pressure because Sociedad were doing a very good job of pressuring to make Barcelona uncomfortable, but they play out of it, they play through it, they move the ball around, they complete, it must have been 40 passes in like a 6-minute span. They keep possession, but they really never end up doing anything with it. They just build and build and build and build and build, and then I think they end up shooting from distance maybe, or the pass gets intercepted, Sociedad go the other way. But then you look at their goals, and it's essentially smash and grab route one. And I kind of love it that the first goal, it is just a ball over the top for Griezmann to run onto. It's very similar to the goal he scored last week, the kind of getting on the end of it, outrunning the defense, and then a lovely little chip. The second goal, another ball over the top, with Sociedad having a very suspect back line that allows Lionel Messi to stay onside. More on that in just a second. But it was sort of Barcelona having this like, no, we're going to pass. We're going to stay true to our idea. Okay, you know what, just kick it long, and we'll see what happens. We've got probably better players, and that's exactly how it went down. So it was a combination of approaches for Barcelona that I found really interesting and genuinely enjoyable, because it would be very pretty soccer, and then, you know what, let's go long and see.
Yeah, I like it when teams mix it up like that. Mm-hmm. It was impressive, and obviously the controversy in this game came from the penalty being given to Sociedad for the first goal for the shirt grab. It was Busquets, wasn't it, or was it a shovey shirt grab? Should we call it?
It was a shovey shirt grab. Yep,
a shovey shirt grab, and then in the dying minutes, Barcelona feeling robbed because a similar situation happening at the other end with, I think it was PK having his shirt pulled. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there, but. Can I ask you, this is another episode of Ryan not understanding the rules of soccer anymore, but for Suarez's goal, Barcelona's second goal, why wasn't he offside? Because he was miles offside. He tracked back a little bit, but he didn't come back onside at all. Yet he joined in the play and got the pass from Leo Messi, put it in the back of the net, but he never got back onside at any point. Is this where you just go, you're an idiot, that's still onside? Or was that not glaring... So
you're talking about the fact that basically when Messi is played in, Suarez stays offside, and then he never sprints backwards and then continues his run forward?
He never returns to go onside again. Basically, he never jogs back. He kind of he's a bit stationary. Maybe takes a couple of steps back, but doesn't. He still remains very much offside.
This one gets Daryl a lot of the time as well. He will disagree with that, but he's lying. It definitely does. And sometimes it gets me too. But I think it's just that because Suarez recognizes what's going to happen, and he knows that Messi is going to drive forward with the ball and then go for the, I think I've called it before on the show, the FIFA goal where you pull the goalkeeper out, you slide it to your open forward, you tap it home, you make sure you don't hit square so you don't lob the goal, but you just pass it in nice and gentle. So I think Suarez knows that's what's going to happen here. So he just kind of holds his positioning and trusts Lionel Messi to advance the ball far enough that then when he plays it, it is lateral, or Suarez is then slightly behind the play. But it still does feel very strange and kind of wrong in terms of the rules because he's offside the whole way, that when Messi plays him in, even if he is then onside because Messi has advanced the ball up the field, it still feels like within the spirit of the game he should be offside because he was in an offside position when the entire play began, but that's not how the rules go. So I guess the goal is given, but it does still feel weird. I take your point there for sure.
It definitely feels real weird, and it feels like that rule is just wrong because the rationale for him being offside to start, onside, sorry, is that he's not interfering with play, right?
Right.
but I feel like he is interfering with play when he scores the goal. I think that's a big interference. It's like the biggest interference you could do. And I'm not one. We're not going to go accuse Luis Suarez of cheating here. God forbid. He's a very, very honest man.
Of course not.
But I think that I'm just not very satisfied with how that played out, even if it is on the money in terms of the rules.
So we should maybe it's one of those where like it's technically correct, which is the best way to be correct, but at the same time feels like it's wrong. Feels like he maybe should have been offside.
Yeah, and that makes me feel better about the penalty not being given to Barcelona at the end. It feels like a karmic payoff of some sorts. I
like that. I did not like the defending from Llorente for Sociedad, who does not have a first name, or if he does, he has one of a series of names. He goes by Llorente, so I'm going to stick with that. He is the one who draws the penalty that gives Sociedad the lead, but then I'm going to say is sort of at fault for both goals, especially the first one, which is basically just kind of a hopeful ball out of the back from Barcelona. Again, they go a bit more direct, and I think Llorente is so focused on not letting Suarez collect the ball and be that link-up option that he tries to step in front and win the ball. Basically not even win it, but sort of it's going to like bounce in, hop up, and he's just going to try to like get a body on it and make sure Barcelona aren't able to play cleanly out. But instead he misjudges, he over-pursues, the ball bounces over his head, and now he's a center back who's 30 yards out of position. Suarez can turn. Barcelona have a 3v2 at that point. And then the part that was especially interesting to me was Llorente then, to his credit, does sprint back, tries to get a position, the goal is scored, and then he proceeds to yell at the rest of the Sociedad defense, I think for not stepping, but when you leave them in a 3v2, I don't think there's a whole lot they can really do, so I'm going to say not great there. Then for the second goal for Barcelona's second, he lets Lionel Messi just kind of stand behind him and never checks to note that the rest of his defense is about 3 yards behind him, so Llorente, in effect, because of that bad offside line, doesn't really know where Lionel Messi is, allows that ball in, which Messi then squares to Luis Suarez, rightly or wrongly. But I'm going to say Llorente maybe could have done a slightly better job there in his defensive duties.
Yeah, he sounds like he needs an Arsenal transfer or something. Let's sign this guy up.
There we go. Sign him up. It'll all work out.
It is always awkward when the player steps and the ball bounces just over his head. It feels very rec league, doesn't it? When you're in that sort of moment of stasis when the ball goes over your head and you're like, oh no, this isn't going to go well. And you hate to see it at the professional level. You really hate to see it.
You hate to see it, but then simultaneously you just know, like, oh, that's not what was supposed to happen. I bet he's going to hear about that, and it does make it slightly more fun. Again, more fun for me, the neutral, less so if you're a Sociedad fan, probably. Anything else you'd like to talk about from Spain, aside from that we've got a Clásico looming?
I suppose very quickly that Real Madrid getting the dramatic winner at the end of their game with Valencia.
Equalizer, but yes.
Equalizer, sorry, yes. Mm-hmm. Coming up for Courtois coming up for the corner, which you love to see in a league game at this stage of the season. You absolutely love to see that. Gets a header saved on the line, and then there's a lovely goalmouth scramble, which Benzema turns in for the last kick of the game. So we got equal points going into this Clásico. It is poised nicely.
Have you ever seen a goalkeeper score a goal like as you're watching the game, not a highlight, not a replay or something, but has that ever happened in a game you were watching?
Yes, so my team Wimbledon in 1997, we knocked Manchester United out of the FA Cup, and in injury time of the first leg, Peter Schmeichel scored an overhead kick, which was ruled offside from a corner.
What?
Yeah, I know, right?
That's not fair.
I know, it's not fair, but I loved it. But I think
Schmeichel deserves to score his overhead kicks.
I mean, VAR might have given it these days. This was 22 years ago, and I loved it. But it was like, that was the ultimate ending to a game, Schmeichel with the overhead kick. But I was there in that stadium, but can't remember any other instances. That's what comes to my head.
I don't think I've ever had one, and yet every time the goalkeeper goes up, I just assume something crazy is going to happen. Like, it really never does. It always ends up with the other team, heads it clear, they kick it out, and then the final whistle goes. But I always have that moment of belief, like, this is going to be it. Goalie's going to score. I just need it to happen once, Ryan, in a game that I'm watching.
I hope that comes for you.
I'm putting that on you now.
Christmas gift this year, Taylor.
If it's not, then that's your fault, because you said you'd make it happen, I think.
Yep, I'll accept those terms.
Perfect. I'm going to assume you also accepted the results of Fiorentina Inter Milan. That was a clumsy one, but I got us there sort of. Fiorentina 1, Inter Milan 1. I don't have many thumbs for this one, aside for thumbs down to Skriniar for not learning from Man City and Tottenham. Tottenham cleaning out Adama Traore whenever they needed to stop his sort of blistering counter-attacking threat. Man City, obviously famous for picking up those professional fouls to make sure attacks don't happen. In this one, Inter Milan winning until very, very late. And essentially, Skriniar has an opportunity to bring down Vlahovic, the eventual equalizer, the goal scorer. But I think he tries to just sort of thinks like, okay, I'm going to shepherd him away from goal. This won't be a threat. We'll see this game out. It'll all be fine. But he never makes enough aggressive contact. He never really puts Vlahovic under that much pressure, that much stress, so that he's able to eventually just kind of bury it from a very tight angle. Say what you will about Samir Handanovic's positioning for that one, but it just, going back and watching it again, it was just a moment screaming for, just give him a clip, take the yellow card. Yes, they're going to be mad. Yes, they're going to get in your face, but they're not going to score a goal, and that's kind of what you need at this point.
Taylor Rockwell giving a thumbs down to a player because he tried to play football instead of a cynical foul.
Hey,
there we have it.
Hey,
that's where we are.
We're trying to be
2019.
practical. We're trying to be practical here, Ryan Bailey. We're trying to be practical.
You got to give a thumbs up to Vlahovic in that moment and in this game in general, because that was a fantastic goal. Wasn't it?
It really was. It really was. Again, from the tight angle, and I think a lot will be made of Handanovic hugging the near post and then maybe slipping and thus not being full extension. But that absolutely takes away from the pinpoint clinicalness of that finish and how he just takes it in stride at full speed, is able to hold off a lack of challenge from Skriniar. Should have been a professional foul, and instead finishes really, really well and gives Fiorentina the point, which they desperately needed. They're now in 13th, well out of the relegation zone, which is to say that I think right now Brescia in 18th with 13 points, so 4 points clear. Well done, Fiorentina. Inter remain top of the table, level on points with Juve, but a superior goal difference. So things remain tight. Lazio falling off a little bit, but still, we would expect it to be a tighter competition overall. I guess Lazio have a game in hand, so they could still close that gap. But right now, Inter versus Juventus, as we expected.
Very much so. And Inter cutting their lead, aren't they, in the past few weeks? That draw at Rome, in Rome last week, and this one here too. It's certainly tight at the top, tighter than they would have liked. And I think this is another one where it could have called the favourite team to drop points, because this was a 3-3 draw back in February when they met. Inter haven't won in their last 5 visits to Florence. So this is one where, I can see why this happened. Maybe they're crumbling under the pressure a little bit. This
is a difficult one, Ryan, but a genuine question for you. Like, when is it? Because a lot of times I will have that sort of whatever, history's history, who kind of cares about what happened? But there does come a time when it feels like, oh no, maybe this is their bogey team, this is the bogey fixture, this is the time when they tend to drop points. And there are those moments when that does correlate, when that does actually happen. Do you have a sort of line, or is there a thing for you, like, when it goes from, who cares what they did in 1997 the last time they met? Like, that sort of graphic of, they haven't played each other since 2004, and in that game, this team won. Like, that's not going to determine what happens here. Versus when there is sort of a trend, I'm wondering, when do you sort of look to that as, okay, now this is an indicator of what may end up happening?
Some trends are stronger than others, obviously, and you have to look at if the circumstances were the same, if the managers were the same, if the players were generally the same. But my general rule is, if it proves me right, then it was good.
Well, a thing that will also make you feel good is today's sponsor, our friends at Policy Genius. Well done, Ryan. It's already December. It's very much December. As much as we love getting seasonal, this month can be a bit stressful. That is definitely true. There's a long list of things to do for the holidays. If life insurance is one of those things, way down on your list, but is very stressful, the stressful things tend to get pushed down. Funny how the fun things tend to stay on the top of the list. Policy Genius might be able to help you cross it off. They'll find you the right life insurance at the best price and do all the work to help get you covered.
Yes, indeedy, Policy Genius makes finding the right life insurance a breeze. In minutes, you can compare quotes from top insurers to find your best price. You could save $1,500 dues or more a year.
Dues?
Sorry, that's what they call them in Australia, isn't it? US dollars.
There we go.
And you can do that, but you can save that much.
Everyone thinks Ryan is Australian right here. He talks about dingoes constantly.
Right, I'm just going to throw now the shrimp on the barbie and carry on talking about Policy Genius, mate. But genuinely, Policy Genius is one of those wonderful things, because in the United Kingdom, where I'm from, not Australia, United Kingdom, these sort of aggregators for insurance are very common, and they're very uncommon here, and Policy Genius is the only one I know of, in fact, and they're so useful because shopping for insurance of any kind is so difficult in this country.
It is.
And you don't appreciate how difficult it is until you've seen how easy it is elsewhere. So I'm glad that something like Policy Genius exists to make this a little bit less of a burden for those people out there.
Agree entirely, and I would also add that if you are going to Australia or you're from Australia, people from there would know that I believe every animal in Australia exists to try to murder humanity. So you want Policy Genius on your side because there's spiders, there's scorpions, there's things in the sea. You can't really trust anything. Even koalas. I feel like koalas all carry knives.
Koalas want to hurt
I'm pretty sure
you?
I know that.
Knives.
I think they're all very mean, but then I believe I'm correct in saying that eucalyptus acts as a sort of like downer for them, which is why they're all sort of very chill and mellow, but they're actually quite ill-tempered if they haven't had their daily dosage of eucalyptus. These are the things that Policy Genius somehow, I guess, protects you from. So if you need life insurance but aren't sure where to start, why not start at policygenius.com? It only takes a few minutes to find the right life insurance policy, apply, cross another thing off your to-do list this holiday season. So with Policy Genius, when it comes to life insurance, it's nice to get it right. Thank you to our friends at Policy Genius. A link to them will be in the show notes. Ryan, one more game to talk about, then we've got Champions League draw. As we are wont to do, let's talk about Bayern Munich. We do sort of not want to always talk about them on the weekend review, but they sort of keep then doing very interesting things week in, week out. Sometimes those interesting things are losing games they should obviously win and firing their coaches. Sometimes it is destroying an opponent 6-1 with an incredibly dominant performance. There could be a couple different recipients of some thumbs up in this one. Ryan, where are you going?
Can I go a bit off the wall here and do a sideways thumb? I'm not sure about Hansi Flick.
Okay.
Because
that is a fair way to be right now, yes.
I think so, because I think there's still an amount of skepticism about him and his role so far with Bayern Munich. Yes, he had that tremendous start, but I think there's still a weakness in this team, and I don't think this game is any indicator of Bayern pushing on, because yes, it was a big result, but if you look at the form, once again, we go back to that. This game was a gimme for Bayern. Before this, they'd beaten them 20 times in a row, Werder Bremen. So
you're saying that is historically significant? 20 times in a row?
20 times in a row, that's a pretty convincing pattern there.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think you'd be shocked if that ended in these circumstances. Werder Bremen not doing too well this season, and they're pretty relegation threatened. They certainly are more so now. They'd lost 4 of their last 5 games before coming into this one. All the signs pointed to Bayern racking up a nice big score in Bavaria, and that they did. But I don't think this relieves any pressure on Flick.
I don't think it does either necessarily. I think that Bayern have sort of publicly stated they're not in for managers like Pochettino. Maybe says that they're going to stick with Flick and see what he will be able to do over the course of the next month or so. And I think to their credit, Bayern are sort of backing him in that he does have coaches around him. He is being given at least some control of the team, a bit more than Freddie Ljungberg is getting. But I think more than anything, it just seems like he has the players potentially buying in, or at least certain players buying in, because you look at this performance from Felipe Coutinho, and he's a player who, heading into this season, I sort of thought of as yeah, he's fine. He's a very good player, but he is not this sort of next-level performer that they seem to be marketing him as and seem to be sort of expecting people to buy into him being. And yet in this game, a hat trick, 2 assists, just involved in really every single goal aside from one, and that goal itself was especially impressive. But even in the final goal, I was like, oh, okay, so he gets 2 goals, 2 assists. He's involved in 4 of the 6. That's pretty good because he's not even on screen, I think, when the play is developing. Then he gets the ball, cuts inside a little bit, bangs it off the post, scores the hat trick. And it's just oh, no, he's just involved in pretty much everything in this game. So at least Felipe Coutinho seems to be buying into it. I'm definitely giving him thumbs up for this game for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That last goal was the mirror image Robin goal, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was the Coutinho goal. It was his trademark. But also that chip. The chip that sort of just grazed the underside of the crossbar as it went in. Oh, bellissimo. I loved it.
It was similar to Gosling for Bournemouth, except Coutinho facing the right way the whole time. But
and there's more intent behind it, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, because the way he is able to time his run perfectly to make sure he stays onside for a ball in for, I believe, David Alaba. But then the tight control and the sort of awareness of, He has enough time to really think about it, which is the last thing you want if you're a striker. The longer you have to think about what you're going to do, the less I feel like you're moving off of instinct. And the way he sort of scans it all down really quickly and thinks like, could bring it down, could try to pass it in, could volley it one time, could go for like a lob over the top, could try to and he just kind of evaluates his options really, really quickly, lands on, will try to settle, and then flick it over the top, and does that within a half second. I think shows how quick his decision making is, and maybe why he is such a good player. If not for Bayern, then just generally speaking.
I think that's what separates us from the pros, isn't it? That kind of decision making, that
absolutely.
split-second kind of thing. It was genius, and he had, much like De Bruyne, he had a perfect game this weekend, didn't he? And it'd be interesting to see where he ends up next season.
It certainly will. It certainly will. For Bayern Munich, though, I do want to give a thumbs up. Wait, do you have speculation on where he'll go, or are you just wondering aloud what it might mean for him?
I'm just, much like Ed Sheeran, I'm thinking out loud.
Well, I'm going to, in the meantime, say thumbs up to Bayern Munich for that fourth goal, because I loved everything from Felipe Coutinho. I thought his goals were excellent, but this fourth goal, I just really, really enjoyed, because it was sort of representative of who Bayern are at their core, which is very technical, very good, and very ruthless, because it's a loose ball. I think in Bayern's half, it's probably 70 yards from the Bremen goal. It's picked up by Thomas Muller, who plays it's a hallmark of Bayern Munich that he picks up the ball. He's got runners ahead of him, lots of movement. He's able to play a long diagonal out to Perisic. Perisic collects, plays it into Robert Lewandowski, who's now at the top of the 18. He lays it off to Thomas Muller. Thomas Muller then chips it back across for Robert Lewandowski to finish himself into the side netting. But it was 4 passes, I believe, between 3 players that went 70 yards and culminated in a lovely volleyed goal. And it just sort of felt like once Bayern are in that sort of next level gear, there's just no way to deal with them. And I think that's definitely what Werder Bremen experienced on the day.
And it spoke well to Lewandowski's athleticism as well, isn't it? Because let's not forget, we say it time and time again, he's 50 years old, Lewandowski, and he's still bringing the ball down like that and putting those volleys away. Wonderful stuff.
Wonderful stuff indeed. For Bayern Munich, it takes them into 5th. Leipzig take top of the table. Gladbach losing on the weekend. Leipzig doing the opposite of that means that they are now top of the table with 33 points. Gladbach second, 31. Dortmund third with 29. Schalke rounding it out with 28. Schalke, for their part, getting a 1-0 win over Eintracht Frankfurt, but they do lose Weston McKennie. Last I saw, it was believed that he had a separated shoulder, or at least a dislocated shoulder, so we would expect he'll be out for at least a little bit of time. Not a great weekend overall for Americans in Europe. I tweeted that. People weren't so thrilled, but it was definitely a downer of a weekend. So let's instead, Ryan, not talk about that. Let's talk about the Champions League. But first, let's talk about one story that you spotted that I particularly enjoyed. It's a good reminder to people that apparently playing chess means that you'll be good at stuff.
It's not often that we talk about Norwegian chess masters on the Total Soccer Show, is it?
It's really not.
We have cause to. Chess champion, the chess master, I should say, a grandmaster. Mm-hmm. What makes a grandmaster? That's a good question. We should look into that. Have the boy look into that, Taylor.
I would say you have to have a beard, but this gentleman does not. I will have the boy look into that. I love you,
Have
Ryan.
the boy look into that. Chess champion Magnus Carlsen, which is a very Scandi name. I like that. He's at the top. He's number 1 on the official FPL game. Number 1 in the world, ahead of millions of people. And he is the Grandmaster chess champion. He said he got there through luck. Wow.
I don't believe him.
I wish I had that kind of luck, frankly.
Yeah.
And by the way, the second place person who could overtake him after the Premier League game today, at the time of recording on Monday, is a former player, Nick Tanner, who played for Bristol Rovers and Liverpool, whose name is Win or Lose on the Booze. So Win or Lose on the Booze could take over a Grandmaster of Chess at the very, very peak of FPL. What is happening?
I mean, I feel bad for this, but it is the case that like Nick Tanner with that team name, Win or Lose on the Booze, that one does feel a bit more like if he said he was there via luck, I would believe him, versus the chess grandmaster. With him, I feel like there's some sort of overarching sinister strategy that I couldn't possibly comprehend with my plebeian brain. But maybe it is just a little bit of luck. Maybe that's how fantasy goes. Or maybe it's just make Mohamed Salah your captain and put as many Liverpool players into your team as you can, and you'll do
and
just
no
fine.
Arsenal players, I think.
And no Arsenal players. Well, speaking of no Arsenal players, or at least none that I can think of, let's talk about the round of 16 of the Champions League. The draw has happened. I'll run through it very quickly, and then we can spotlight a couple if we so choose. We've got Borussia Dortmund versus PSG, Real Madrid versus Man City. That's kind of a big one. Atalanta versus Valencia. Somehow both teams happy with that draw, I'm going to guess. Yeah. Atletico Madrid v Liverpool, Chelsea Bayern Munich, Lyon Juventus, Tottenham Leipzig, Napoli, Barcelona. Of those 8 fixtures, Ryan, which one are you most excited to see?
Woof, woof. Can I say, first of all, this is a great draw, isn't it?
It really is.
I mean, it is a result of only European top 5 leagues being involved anymore, and that's probably indicative of the power and all the nonsense that goes along with top draw soccer these days. But I think my theme I'd like to pick out is that there's a lot of trouble ahead for English teams.
Yes.
Each English team has a tricky draw. I mean, perhaps no trickier. I think maybe the highlight here is Liverpool, Atletico Madrid. That's neither team. That's probably the worst draw for both teams in that game, right?
Yeah, I think it probably is, because Atleti struggling this season to kind of implement their new style, but still Atletico Madrid, still Diego Simeone, and also the sort of team that we've seen in the past be not as good in the league as they're trying to figure things out, but the Champions League is that animal where you can sort of plan for it, you can prep for it, you can rest players, especially if you're not in a title challenge and you're really kind of putting your emphasis on the Champions League. You can be very prepared for that against a team like Liverpool, who certainly have that gap at the top of the Premier League, but have to kind of spread their resources around, can't really afford to just buckle down and focus on that one game entirely. Yeah. So just for those components combined with the star talent, obviously, that will be on offer, that definitely is one that stands out. And then to your point, they really do have a tricky route, do the English clubs, because we've talked previously about Leipzig and how they could be a bogey team or a team that people overlook and don't quite realize how good they are, how tenacious they're going to be in that press. It's going to be against Mourinho's Tottenham, who are probably going to be sitting in a little bit, as we saw them do this weekend, against teams that kind of go at you and have more of the ball. That's definitely an option, but could be a tricky one. And then Madrid, Man City, get out of here. That's craziness. That's a crazy draw.
That's great. I think that's probably the box office one, isn't it? And this is Pep Guardiola and Zinedine Zidane both trying to win this competition without Messi and Ronaldo, respectively, both probably panicking at that prospect. But I mean,
I kind of didn't think about that element of it. Well done, Ryan Bailey. Well done, sir.
That's fun, isn't it? I mean, finally, Man City in a cup competition get drawn against a difficult team. It seems like I thought they'd get Preston in this draw, but they managed to actually draw a big team at this stage of the draw. So that's good that the gods have looked upon them that way. And I think Real Madrid aren't perfect at the moment. They got a good chance, and obviously Pep's got a bit of history at the Bernabeu. I think this could be a really, really interesting draw. Man City are still favourites to win the whole competition. I checked the bookies odds earlier this morning, so they obviously fancy them to get through that one. And I think, as you mentioned, Tottenham, RB Leipzig. That's people like Tottenham fans saying, yeah, that's the best draw we could have had. I think you could argue that Valencia might have been better suited to Tottenham, but that's really difficult, I think. And imagine the Timo Werner-led attack against that pretty porous Tottenham backline. That could be big trouble. And Mourinho's going to have to draw on all of his experience to get Tottenham through that, which he may do so. And the other one, which I think is a bit of a stinger, is the other English team, Chelsea against Bayern Munich. Right. Everyone's saying, 2012 will be fine, blah, blah, blah. The second leg is at the Allianz Arena. I don't think that's going to be very easy. And looking at, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the Chelsea backline against your Lewandowskis and such, that's not going to be easy. That's not going to be easy at all.
No, and that is the sort of like that 2012, we did it then. Like, that's the type of thing that I'm talking about, where it's like, that doesn't really resonate with me in 2019 so much. And the fact that this game will be played in 2020, it's even more time. So I don't think you can look at that as like a trend, more so a thing that happened once in history. Whereas I think by February, maybe we'll see a stronger Chelsea team, that maybe they'll invest a little bit and they'll have a bit more depth. But the same could be said of Bayern Munich. Maybe they too will invest. Maybe they too will strengthen a little bit. Maybe they'll have stuck with Hansi Flick and it will all be running smoothly. But even if it's not, as we saw this weekend, they are capable of turning it on and getting those 6 goals. So I do think Chelsea have their work cut out for them. So too do, really, you're right, every other English team. I'm going to guess Barcelona, pleased with their draw. Napoli struggling, sacked Carlo Ancelotti. So you wouldn't say that they're as dominant a threat as they might have been. PSG Dortmund, that feels like another game that could be very interesting, but could also be a blowout either way. And I wouldn't be that surprised. That's got some goals in it, hasn't it? It definitely does. And then Atalanta Valencia, I have less to say because I really can't claim to be so familiar with Atalanta. But sure, why not?
That could be a sneaky, really good tie, I think, Atalanta, Valencia. You know, Atalanta's work rate's great. They've got a good press. They work really hard. And Valencia, we know, a very quality team, as we saw at the weekend. I think that could be a pretty exciting... I just don't see a dud here. I don't see a dud in... I mean, maybe Lyon, Juventus, I'm not... Maybe that'll be my least appointment viewing of the whole one. And then...
We had Sam Tai, whom I know you enjoy, even if he's entirely too tall. We had him on the show last week. And he was saying that Lyon could be... He's like 6. I think he's only like 6'3" or 6'4". But
he's absurdly tall.
He was also wearing shoes that I think gave him another inch. So that he stood tall.
His hair gives him another couple as well.
Also that, yeah, he's got the Dolph Lundgren sort of blonde semi-flat top. He will not love any way that I'm describing him, and I'm fine with it. But he did speculate that Lyon could be a particularly tricky team. They could be the sort of team that you want to avoid because they're easy to overlook but have a lot of talent.
Yeah.
And given the season for Juventus in that they're still second, still having a strong season, but aren't quite hitting those marks that they met in seasons past, that's another one. So yeah, I think what it all comes down to, as you said, is that it's a lot of very good teams drawn against each other and very exciting fixtures as a result. None that we would really say like, oh, well, that one's over, done and dusted before it even starts, which is a nice thing to get in the round of 16.
Yeah, definitely. And Lyon were pretty good in the group stage, weren't they? Was it Atleti they beat in the group stage?
I think so.
They got a big scalp, didn't they? So, I wouldn't write off them by any means.
Well, there we are. All right. Well, we will be back to talk, I'm certain, about some Champions League as well as some other leagues next week. But for now, Ryan Bailey, anything else before we close it out?
That's all. I'm just going to go practice my chess because it'll make me better at Fantasy League.
I believe that is correct. Or go play for Liverpool and I forget who it was. Bristol City? Is that who it was?
That's right. Yeah,
okay, there we go. Bristol Rovers, excuse me. Oh, that could be trouble. Go play for them. Either way, you'll be first or second.
Win or lose, something about booze. There we go.
All right. Well, Ryan, thank you very much. As always a pleasure to chat with you. Now go and do the many, many other things that you have to do today.
I shall do. Always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you, Tay-Tay.